And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, or the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who always flies his drones responsibly. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing good. Not a huge drone guy, but glad to be home after winter meetings. Long week, fun week like usual. Now trying to catch up on some sleep and drinking a lot of water. I will say sometimes there are benefits to not covering a good team, or Tigers are a playoff team, not calling them a bad team, but a team that isn't always all that active. Because I stayed an extra night in the DFW area. I went to a Turnpike Troubadours concert at Billy Bob's. It was awesome.
Shout
I was
out.
with Chandler Rome, now part of the Foul Territory Network. Check out his pod, Crush City. And his day was pretty much ruined. He was working all day.
Yeah. I mean, I've obviously had a chance to hang out with Chandler several times. Really cool guy. And I'm not going to lie, like the first thing I thought of when I saw the trade go down, I was like, ugh. Chandler's in for a longer day than he thought. And so, but hey, that's the job. That's a job. That's okay. It was a fun week for me. Like I said, got to hang out with Cody. We met up with Austin Jackson. We got that, planned here moving forward. So everybody be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening and on YouTube so you can see our debut episode with Austin Jackson here pretty soon. Really excited for that. Couldn't be a cooler dude. Could not be a cooler dude when we met up with him this week in Dallas. All right. Back to some more present topics, Cody. Obviously, we're recording this Sunday night, a little bit after 8 Eastern time. Not anything has happened in regards directly to the Detroit Tigers. I say that. Maybe something will happen while we're recording this. But I there was a question kind of bouncing around my mind a little bit as I assessed some of the moves that have been made, maybe some that haven't been made yet, the rumors and all that stuff, and like for baseball in general. And it got me thinking. I was like, has it been a good offseason for the Tigers? Because, all right, you sign Alex Cobb, and we talked about that signing already, but you got yourself a veteran, professional, major league pitcher with, you have to assume like they got a plan for this guy, and he's smart enough to recognize that. That's probably why he signed, blah, blah, blah. Gave him a little money, little incentives in there. Cool. Not really anything else of like, large note, little nicks and knacks here and there. But then you look at the American League, like in general. Juan Soto is no longer in the American League. Kyle Tucker, we were just talking about that, is no longer in the American League. Garrett Crochet, while still in the American League, is no longer in your division. All right. And the previous defending World Series champions, who you would think are incentivized to like have a much better year than they had in 2024, they bring back Evaldi. Cool. Yeah, cool. And then they sign Jake Berger, a guy that acquire via trade, Jake Berger, a guy that we had talked about on this podcast, who he's got that one stat, that one counting number that seems cool. But other than that, he's like a pretty flawed player. And they have real problems over there in Texas, too, if you look at the trends that went down in 2024. So I say all that. Now, obviously, there's been some other moves here and there. But I say all that to say you really can't say that anyone in the American League has made some leaps and bounds efforts so far this offseason. Now, the Yankees, to their credit, they're making a bunch of other moves, but I'm not really worried about them, like, adding to their pitching staff. I'll take the Tigers brass at that any day of the week, just in general. So they're not being passed by anybody. Perhaps the Astros are going into some sort of small rebuild, like a year rebuild type deal, It kind of seems to me that the Tigers' standing, as sure as hell, has not gone down in the American League, but it's probably closer to have gone up just by the fact of this talent that has left the other contenders in the American League. So all that to say, they probably have advanced a little bit with their inactions just by circumstance. So what, like, I say something like that, like what kind of comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think it's important how you kind of phrase that question. Has this been a good offseason for the Tigers in terms of what they have done so far? Not really. Now, offseason's not over. But in terms of how their standing has rose through subtractions elsewhere in the American League, like you said, even Crochet, at least he's not in your division anymore. I think it is all good news for the Tigers. And it's funny you brought this up. I think we have a piece on The Athletic running Monday kind of talking about the power balance really shifting toward the NL. I don't know that I fully agree with that premise because that just kind of acts like the Baltimore Orioles don't exist, who could easily bounce back and be a force. The Texas Rangers, yeah, they've got some problems, but man, they could be a force next year if a couple things go right. So I don't think it's like, oh, there are no good teams in the AL, but kind of the sexy teams, the superpowers right now. Phillies, Mets, Dodgers all in one division, and then you still have the Braves, you have the Padres. Like there is kind of more star power going on right there. So sure, I think it can be helpful for the Tigers. You're coming off competing in your division, winning a wild card spot. To be expected. No one in the AL Central is really shaking things up, making noise right now this offseason. And another thought I had, like, if you're Riley Greene trying to boost your status, your contract incentives, not that he has any right now, but like future, whatever, this could be some really good stuff. Think of it. Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, Gunnar Henderson. Probably the three best position players in the AL. After that, who you got for MVP? There are some guys who could bounce. Julio Rodriguez could be right there, had a little bit of a down year. Corey Seager can never be a full year. That's a dude. And there's some other guys, but like Riley Greene could be poised to fully entrench himself as like a top 5 player in the American League if he takes another step forward last year. That's just another thought I had because of some of the departures in the AL.
Well, one of the things that I was going to say is that what betting odds could you put on Riley to make the All-Star team next year? Like the 2 All-Star outfielders just went to the National League.
I think it's just slam dunk. Like if that dude's healthy, I think he's gonna make the All-Star team.
Yeah, and then I like that you bring up the MVP thing because now we're on and not to say that we're calling that that's like a thing that is an expectation in 2025, but if you're like me and you're a savant of all these year-to-year records, like we're looking at an MVP dash, make up a number 7, 8, whatever. Like that's a real thing in this future now with the moves that have been made. I guess, Cody, in general, do you like? We'll throw.
I didn't mention Jose Ramirez in that conversation. I'm the people I hate now who don't mention Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez should absolutely be in that conversation.
Absolutely, no arguments here. Like any thoughts on, because we talked about the Crochet trade like immediately after it happened, and I was just kind of like, it seemed pretty chalky to me. Like I liked it for both teams. Like I did too. I didn't think the Red Sox gave up too much. I didn't think the White Sox like sell low on that. I thought it was one of those trades. I was like, yep, makes a lot of sense to me. The Burger trade, their number 17 prospect goes to Miami. Guess who the number 17 prospect is for the Tigers as of right now? Max Anderson. So everybody that was throwing Max Anderson and Burger trades that sent to us, kudos. You had the right idea.
The Tigers probably have a much better system than Miami, top to bottom, I would think. But yeah, that's interesting.
So and then not even to miss out on this. The trade that involves old friend of the program, Isaac Paredes, like it almost looks like it takes out one suitor. So this goes back to the good thing. It almost takes out one suitor, at least in theory, for Bregman's services. And if you're the Tigers and you're doing, can we call it nicely, cost-controlled moves? The less suitors, the better, like in theory. So like it seems to me that this past week, this Winter Meetings week, they ended up looking better than they did before. And of course, this like plays right into Scott Harris's hands with lowering the incentive to spend when everybody around you is either losing players or like retooling or whatever. It's like, if we just maintain status quo right now, we might be okay. But but the Bregman market still looms over Major League Baseball in general, and until there's a move in one way, the Tigers. So
yeah, it's almost oddly quiet, I think, regarding Bregman right now. Maybe that's because there's still some dominoes to fall. Sounds like the Houston Astros, according to Chandler Rum's report, have expressed a lot of interest in trading for Nolan Arenado. I've already talked about Arenado not being interested in Detroit. He's got a full no-trade clause. We'll see if he's interested in Houston. Sounds like that's a major question mark, but that's also another signal that the Astros appear quite willing to move on from Alex Bregman. Either that or it's like a genius negotiating ploy. I'm not sure which, but I kind of get the sense there are a lot of teams standing around the table and just like waiting for each other to fold. And, you know, as I kind of wrote for Monday about the Tigers, like this winter meetings, the questions that were answered, and probably more importantly, the ones that weren't, seem to really hint toward they're fully in on this new identity as a big brain team that's not that invested in free agency, that is very invested in development and finding other underutilized assets. These things aren't necessarily new in the Scott Harris era, but it seems like, especially now that they are coming off a playoff team and seem to still be behaving very much in the same way, this may be the new world order of the Tigers. All that said, I still believe they're interested in Bregman. This is becoming a really overused word in baseball. But yeah, if you're standing around that poker table and the Astros are going to fold, and then maybe we'll see what happens with the Yankees. And, you know, there's a world in which a couple teams fold. And that's why you keep yourself in on that conversation, assuming you're not willing to pay the $200+ million. Not a ton of tangible news on Bregman's market right now. I think everyone in baseball is super interested to see kind of what the next step is going to be here.
Yeah, and the timeline of it all, I'll be forever fascinated with. And you know, like let's kind of transition to another free agent that I would say Twitter scuttlebutt, not really anything like real reporting, but it's okay because I find it fascinating when people are talking about it. And that's a guy that we haven't really given that much time. That's called Paul Goldschmidt, who's the other corner over there in St. Louis. And now it's not a trade thing. He is a free agent. So that's obviously the big difference. But he's 37, right? He's 37 years old and he's a name, but he plays first base. There's discussions about whether the Tigers are better off with Goldschmidt as their regular first baseman or Torque. My answer to that would be they are the same. Because I just went and looked at a couple numbers. I'm not trying to say these are the end-all, be-all, but Goldschmidt last year offensively was worth 1.3 WAR. All right, he was negative 0.8 WAR defensively. Torque, obviously much less time in the major leagues, was worth 0.1 offensive WAR and negative 0.3 defensive WAR. So one could reason that had Torque played the entire year in the major leagues last year, he would have basically the same numbers as Goldschmidt did last season. Torque is he's going to be in his age 25 season. Goldschmidt is more than a dozen years older than that, and I would believe to be a more diminishing player given the age. Not really breaking any news on that one. So how would you address this Goldschmidt possibility, Cody? Because to me, I don't like. I'm in on the Christian Walker stuff. Like I'm in on some of these other first base ideas, like as ideas and explore. To me, there's not really much to explore the Goldschmidt, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I do think, when kind of the report surfaced, it was like, that is interesting. That's just one guy we haven't talked a lot about. Now, I want to be clear. I've not heard the Tigers having quote unquote interest in Goldschmidt. Not saying it's true or false, just saying I haven't really had anyone actually tell me that. But seeing it out there in the void that is Twitter got me interested. And it's a little bit of a tough case because obviously, 37, not coming off a good year. But the exit velocity is still strong. The barrel rate declined a little bit, but not a lot. There's still some things to like in the underlying metric. I think the big mystery with Goldschmidt's decline last year was his walk rate plummeted from 12.7% in 23 to only 7.2% last year. His strikeout rate ticked up a little bit. His chase rate ticked up a little bit. A little bit hard to know what to make of that. Then you got to go back to the fact, like, well, he is 37, going on 38. These things happen when players get older. So that gives me definitely some pause. He hasn't hit fastballs very good the past 2 years. But there are still some good things Goldschmidt can bring to your team, obviously. Well, I think one of the immediate thoughts that pops up is like, if you're going to sign an older first baseman, would you not rather have one Carlos Santana? Santana is 38, going on 39, so he's a year older. Has never posted the same exit velocities or barrel rates, but still walks at a really high clip, still plays really good first base defense. I think in a way, Goldschmidt's the bigger name, but at this stage in their careers, they seem like pretty comparable players. I would guess a 1-year deal for both of them. That's a guess. And if I had to pick one, I think I would pick Santana, and I'm not sure it would be close. Similar without the glaring evidence of decline so far. Now, when you get a player that age, you're risking decline with either one of them. But if I had to choose one, I'm going Carlos Santana.
Yeah, and any real interest in either one of them would immediately bring to mind the the comments that Scott Harris made during winter meetings about Torque. And we talked about it on our last episode about how it just kind of seems like, you're not really treating him as a valuable asset, which, look at the numbers. There's not really anything there that dictates that he should be treated as a valuable asset. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that it becomes that, but at a certain point, the ball player is the ball player. As you have said probably a million times, Cody, it's like he's had over, was it 1,000 at bats? Is that what you say? Is there over 1,000?
1,400, I believe.
1,400 at bats. It's like
plate appearances.
Sorry. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, at a certain point, you're holding on to something that may not be there. All right.
It was tough to know. Another quick thought with Scott Harris, always important to look at splits. Paul Goldschmidt, still pretty good against left-handed pitching. OPS against lefties was 839 last year. You know who's really good against left-handed pitching still? Carlos Santana, OPS 934 against lefties last year. Another check in the Carlos Santana department.
That'll play.
Or you just pay for Christian Walker, but
that'll play, as they say. All right, we're gonna do a quick ad, real quick, for StoryWorth. So stay tuned for a quick word.
Cool Christmas idea here. If you're not sure what to get your parents, pay attention.
This holiday season, I want to give a gift to my loved ones that makes them feel special and unique. That gift is StoryWorth.
Here's how it works. Each week, StoryWorth emails your loved one a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick. Things like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? And what's the farthest you've ever traveled? All your loved one needs to do is respond with a story. Long or short, it doesn't matter. After that year of fun, StoryWorth compiles those stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. This is the perfect book to pass along at family gatherings or read with your kids. It is beautifully orchestrated by StoryWorth, and that's why it has more than 35,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot, with millions of stories preserved since they were founded over 10 years ago.
With StoryWorth, I'm giving those I love most a thoughtful, personal gift from the heart and preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/foul and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/foul to save $10 on your first purchase.
StoryWorth.com/foul. So yeah, very neat idea. And as somebody who still loves the physical media, I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Let's transition from talking about the Tigers now to think about the Tigers now while going back to how the Tigers were thought of a couple months ago. What do I mean by that? So another thing that was popping into my head over the past week or so, especially when it comes to spending, is I wanted to go back to Scott Harris's comment on MLB Network. He's being interviewed by Brian Kenny about, now this is in late May, like May 28th of 2024. And of course, Gotta talk about spending. I think it's Scott Harris's probably favorite thing to talk about, especially on like national networks or whatever, like live TV. So he goes into a spew about like, Chris Ilitch has promised the resources will be there, blah, 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 blah. We've heard it all before. He said, we're not quite there yet as far as spending at that level because we need to build the foundation of this team to put us in position to supplement it with some free agent signings in the upcoming winters. Keep in mind, again, this was May 28th. I have the confidence the resources will be there, blah, blah, blah. They've always supported us. We got to work in the Little Caesars corporate headquarters. That's really cool. We will have to develop the core. This again, now I'm back to direct quoting. We just have to develop the core that we're going to spend around, and we also have to target players in upcoming winters that can really help us. So you go back and look at that quote, Cody. Technically, nothing that has happened this offseason is contrary to that. However, the way it was perceived was, all right, when the Tigers get good, then there'll be some more spending. Now, you go around deep into the playoffs, you go 6 outs away from 6-5, whatever, outs away from reaching the ALCS. That would qualify in a lot of people's minds as, quote, being good, and a lot of the core being in place enough to spend around. So when you look at the Tigers now, and then you think back to when that was said, is Scott technically in line with what this either the message specifically or the spirit of that message?
I'm glad you brought this up. It's really interesting. I think because May 28th, 29th, whatever, feels like a lifetime ago in Tigers world. So, can you even compare the spirit of the message? I know at the time I thought this kind of seems like Scott, like soft launching the fact that he doesn't think this is the core. And a lot has changed since then. And pretty tough you just made the playoffs. And you do have some pretty clear, very strong pieces. The farm system had another great year. There's some very good things happening in the Tigers organization. So I think if you go back to the spirit of that message, or even the literal message, wouldn't that mean that now's the time to spend around the core? Like, am I wrong there?
No, and I've said this before. I'm a big believer in like opportunistic spending, and I'm repeating myself, but I have no choice but to repeat myself until something happens. I no longer have to repeat myself. That's the Bregman deal. Is a guy that is hit free agency at a time when you are, quote, good, or you are, quote, good, and fills a position that you want to get more production out of, and brings like what did Scott talk about this week? Veteran leadership in the clubhouse. Like,
heard a lot about veteran leadership. To get veteran leadership, you gotta sign some more veterans, which is interesting.
So in theory, that kind of plays. You know what I mean? So I do keep having to remind myself, like, it's not like the offseason has passed the Tigers by. There's still a lot of teams that are also either waiting to do like another trade or a signing or whatever. There's still a lot to be had in this offseason in general.
There is, especially with hitters. Soto signed, but the other big bats, man, are and Tucker's gone now, but like there's some big bats that still got to move.
Yeah, and like and then with each deal, there's going to be some sort of ripple effect, whether it's like I talked about, like one suit or less for Bregman, or all of a sudden, like, just for like pulling an example out of my butt here, like the Tigers signed Bregman, all of a sudden Jace Young becomes somewhat like available to other teams. So like that thing could happen with other franchises. You see what I'm saying? Like other opportunities to acquire talent. So to me, like, I wanted to go in when I revisited that quote thinking, he's not doing what he said he was going to do. In fairness, when I read it, it's like it kind of plays. Like it kind of plays exactly how he like portrayed it. However, I still think obviously the team is in a different spot than what it was at that time. So you want to talk about spending? Spend.
It's such a tough conversation. We've gone over it before. The whole spin versus not spin thing, and spending's not everything, and free agency is not everything. And I've never advocated that they need to have some like ridiculous sign Corbin Burns and Juan Soto and Christian Walker and Alex Bregman. But I think this team is very clearly in a spot where like one real legit all-star bat, and then maybe another very strong guy like a Carlos Santana can make your team a lot better. Makes me want, and then again, like, although there's a lot of offseason left, the messaging from winter meetings this past week just didn't do much to change the sense or really what it did is it reinforced the sense that like Tigers don't have much interest in maybe doing even that. There is a lot of offseason left to play out, but one thing that makes me wonder is like, what are these internal discussions actually like? If you're like, just how possible is it to overcomplicate everything? If your goal is to win the World Series and you have $1 million, I would imagine if you add Alex Bregman to your internal models, the team's win total would go up. Or even if you added Ha-Seong Kim and Christian Walker, like I would imagine, maybe I'm wrong, that the team's like internal modeling be like, no, you will have a better team. There's always a cost benefit analysis. I refuse to believe that the Tigers like don't have the money to do moves of this caliber. They have a low payroll. The Bregman is the longer term deal that maybe comes with risks of downside in the future. Maybe this means a little less playing time for Jace Young, or maybe it means How You Lee's debut is moved back a couple years. But I feel like if this is your lane when spending, like I just don't see the whole like, oh, well, it's going to block young talent. I just don't really think it is. So I hope that's an accurate assessment of like how I feel and what, when I talk about spending, like kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's wrap up here with a fun little nugget. So sometimes Cody and I will be talking. In this case, it was in person over a couple soda pops, and I was like, Alex Cobb, obviously Ty Cobb. I was like, have they had like another Cobb on their roster? I was like, surely they've been around a long time. Could have been one before Ty. Like, just like curious. I was like, I'm gonna look this up later. I'm gonna look this up. So I did, and I found that there was another Cobb that played for the Tigers, and he's got himself a long Wikipedia page. I say long Wikipedia page. He played in one major league game, and it was with the Tigers. He was a catcher. His name's Joe Cobb. But is that his name?
No, what is his name?
He was born Joseph Stanley Seraphin, but he is officially in the registry, like baseball wise, as Joseph Stanley Cobb. He played one game in 1918 for the Tigers, so he was teammates with Tyrus, and he's actually most known for hitting 300 for the Baltimore Orioles, then in 1923 and 1924, then a minor league team considered one of the best minor league teams ever assembled. So there's your funny little Tigers history nugget right there. They have had another Cobb besides Ty. It was at that time. If you go to his Wikipedia page, it's a picture of him with Ty Cobb. Like, just all kinds of like just weirdness, deep dive. I encourage everybody to go read about it because this guy was holding out as a minor league player. His name's Cobb. He played one game for the Tigers, and there's a lot of information you can find about him, except for when he started going by Cobb.
Shout out to the loyal listeners who followed us way back in the day. The lockout days of Kieran's Cobb connections. You guys remember that? Shout out to anyone who remembers that. Here's an ultimate Cobb connection. It is crazy. Tigers have gotten more than 100 years without having a player with the last name Cobb. Now they got one in Alex. Another interesting tidbit. Dylan Dingler has changed his number from 38 to 13. I'm going to guess that's clearing the way for one Alex Cobb, who's worn 38 at a couple different career stops. So Dylan Dingler going with the unlucky 13. I'll be interested to hear his reasoning for that one.
Oh, man. I love the smell of a nice spring training notebook in mid-December. Because those stories will be had there.
And so, yes, obviously also the thing, like, Alex will be the first Cobb to have a number on his Detroit Tigers uniform.
Good call. Good call there. One and only Cobb with a number. How about that? Anything else, Cody, before we jet out of here?
No, I think that's it. Looking forward to some more content coming up. I believe next week should be the Austin Jackson debut. And at one point, maybe the Tigers will do something cool. We'll throw in an emergency pod. Waiting for that day.
Yeah, so far it's not happened. Maybe send Scott your concert schedule here and just make sure he doesn't do it on that day. But then again, he'll probably
we'll
just do
probably
it.
not do an emergency pod for like a middle reliever. Just being honest there.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Want to thank everybody for listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Want to thank you for watching on YouTube, subscribing there as we try to grow it as the season, kind of quickly approaches. So appreciate everybody sticking with us through this off season. Again, we will have an episode with Austin Jackson out here pretty soon. And that includes the week of Christmas. We will still be doing podcasts. So if you're traveling, if you're trying to avoid the in-laws, we got your back. Hey, I'm sorry. I got to hear what Kieran and Cody got to say. All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening. For Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.